Hello everyone, welcome back. Elizabeth Pozziato here reading the last chapter of Talking Pictures. This is a book that I published in 2008. It was the first book in my series. Since then, I have released The Last Aria, which is the same thing. It's a cooking novel, a mystery, and it comes with a companion recording. And the ghost is an opera singer in that one. And whenever she communicates, she does so through some of the arias that you will hear because that book has a companion recording. So whenever the opera singer ghost communicates, it's through dreams, it's usually through an aria. And there's usually a line in that aria that translates to tell of her situation because, as always, it's very cryptic. So we're going to sum up Talking Pictures today. Some of you may have guessed the ending. And that's okay. It was my first book, and I think you'll find that The Last Aria is a more meaty book, a lot more story, a lot more recipes, more detailed environment. I learned a lot. And the third book, which I'm just about to release, is again a growth period in writing and understanding how to tell a story. So thanks for sticking with me. Chapter 6. It was past 9 a.m. when Barbara had risen. She had slept very deeply and was sore from laying so long. She rose groggily, robed, and filled her coffee pot with water. This was definitely a coffee morning. Not 5 minutes after having coffee, the doorbell rang. Looking through the curtain, Barbara saw the mailman walking away from her house. She opened her door, and there on the porch was a package from her sister. It was fairly large and heavy. She pulled it inside and placed it on her table. Using a sharp kitchen knife, she slit the tape edges and opened it. More things from her mother's house, with a note from her sister. Dear Barbara, I hope you are okay. I know you might have wanted some of these things since you're the cook in the family. Also, I have something to tell you. Call me when you get this package. Barbara's fuzzy demeanor cleared at the last line of the note. Something to tell me? She headed to the phone and called her sister. Hello? Hi, Jean, it's Barbara. Hi, Barbara. I'm so glad you called. I have something very interesting to tell you. You're not going to believe this. Barbara sat down and listened to her sister. I was going through some of Mom's stuff. There were so many boxes in the garage to go through. Plus, there are 2 old dressers in the garage that were full of pictures and letters. Well, it's kind of drudgery going through this stuff and so boring sometimes that I found myself reading some of the letters. Some of them are really beautiful. Letters from Dad to Mom when they were first dating. Well, among these letters, I found 3 very interesting letters that I'm not sure what to make of. Barbara knew it was best to let her sister continue without interruption. These letters date about 6 months after Daddy died. They're to a family in Keithsburg, and they talk about, well, I'm not sure, but I think maybe Mom gave them our little brother. The line was silent. Barbara's heart was racing, and her hands became very cold as she held the receiver to her heart. Barbara, are you there? Barbara closed her eyes and said, Yes, I'm here. Did you know about this, Barbara? Still stunned, Barbara started to cry. Barbara, are you all right? Yes, I'm all right. It's just that I think Mom has been trying to tell me this. What do you mean, Mom's been trying to tell you this? Barbara told Jean about her dreams, about the frame and the photo album. This time, Jean was stunned into silence. Barbara, I have an address for the family who adopted our little brother. I'm going to write to them and see if I can get a response. Barbara agreed with the plan and was about to say goodbye when Jean stopped her and said, Do you want to know his name? Barbara held her breath hesitantly and answered yes. But a second before Jean spoke his name, Barbara knew what it was. She thanked her sister, told her she loved her, and that she would call her very soon. Barbara couldn't stop thinking about what her sister had said and about what William had said and what she had seen in her dream. Was it a coincidence, or was her mother really trying to tell her something? It was so much to take in. Barbara needed to go somewhere to think. She grabbed her coat, gloves, and hat and headed outside towards the lake. Most of the snow had melted because of the warm sun, and the ground was a little muddy. She walked slowly around the lake, taking in the starkness of it all. The old oak trees looked like beautiful silhouettes against a brilliant blue sky, and the winter birds were chirping in celebration of the warmth. Deep in thought, Barbara walked for more than an hour, and as if guided by an unseen force, walked right up to William's house. She didn't know what she was doing there, but still she didn't want to go home. From behind her, she heard William say, "You think I should reshingle the roof?" Startled, Barbara turned to see William holding an armload of wood. "What?" she asked. "The roof. You were looking at the roof." "Oh, no, I was just thinking." "Yeah, from my front sidewalk inspires me to think, too. Would you like to come in? You'd be amazed at the thinking you can do inside." He smiled at her, passed her, opened the front door, and stood there waiting for her to follow. She followed him into the kitchen. The fire was burning so hot, her cold, numb cheeks started to hurt. "How can you stand such a hot fire?" He turned. "I told you, it keeps the heating bills down, and it's easier to raise bread dough in a warm kitchen." He looked over to the very counter they sat at last night. There were 3 large bread bowls covered with linen towels. Barbara started removing the layers of winter clothing, her coat, scarf, hat, mittens. She laid them on the hearth and walked towards William. "Did you go for a walk?" he asked her as he started to put more wood on the fire. "Yes, I did." "It's a bit cold for walking, isn't it?" Barbara stood away from the fire as William stoked it with a long iron prod. Barbara looked on the mantel at the photos of William's family and looked around for other photos but saw none. "Would you like some hot cocoa?" "No, don't go to any trouble." "No trouble. I have a seat." He pulled out a small stainless saucepan and put it on his stove. From his fridge he pulled milk, and from his pantry some Ibarra Mexican chocolate. He unwrapped a disc of the cinnamon-laced chocolate and snapped it into 3 pieces, placing them all in the pan of milk. He stirred it slowly with a whisk until the chocolate had finally melted. He cooked the hot chocolate until it was just about to boil, shut it off, then whisked very fast to create a froth. He poured it into 2 large, heavy stoneware mugs and placed one in front of Barbara. She thanked him and took the mug, brought it to her lips, and inhaled the heavenly cinnamon chocolate aroma. She took a small sip and quickly took another. It was so delicious and exactly what she needed. She looked at William and thought, could he be my brother? They both had light brown hair and blue eyes. There was something so familiar about the way he looked that she just had to ask, "William, last night you told me you were adopted. Do you have a picture of your family?" He looked up from his cup. "Why do you ask?" Barbara didn't want to appear too anxious. "I just wondered what your parents look like." "Well, it's funny you should ask that because just last week I was that was my dog in the background. Just last week when I was unpacking my office, I came across a box my adopted mother gave me before she died. It had a few things from my birth family. You might find this kind of funny, but the box had 3 recipes and 1 picture. That was all." Barbara was riveted by what he was saying. Oh, I lost my place. Because my computer, my screen flashed. I'm just going to continue on. Page 158. Just last week, I was unpacking my office. I came across a box my adopted mother gave me before she died. It had a few things from my birth family. You might find this kind of funny, but the box had 3 recipes and 1 picture. That was all. Barbara was riveted by what he was saying. "Can I see the picture?" "Sure, okay, I'll go and get it." William left to get the picture, and Barbara couldn't help but follow him. He laughed. "Please excuse the mess, but I'm still not completely unpacked." Barbara looked around the large office. There was no need for apology. The office was laid out beautifully, complete with built-in bookshelves and a large mahogany desk. The windows in the office looked out on the same lake she looked out on. William opened the top drawer and retrieved a small desk key. Opening the bottom drawer on the right, and pulled out an old leather-bound box. The leather on the box looked the same as the leather that her old cookbooks were tooled from. He opened the lid and sifted through until he pulled out the picture and handed it to Barbara. Once again, Barbara knew without knowing that the picture was the one that was missing from her album. She looked at William through tear-filled eyes. William's eyes were a little misty, too. "I never knew my mother or my sisters." Barbara wiped the tears from her eyes and said, "You know one of them." William looked up at her. "What do you mean I know one of them? I've never met." He looked at Barbara with questioning eyes. Barbara walked back to the kitchen and laid the photo on the counter, pulled on her coat and said, "I have something to show you. I'll be right back." William, like Barbara, grabbed his coat and followed her out the door. Barbara walked very quickly with William following up to her, opening the door, and went into her bedroom. She came out with a box that held her family album. "Let's go back to your house. I have something to show you." Practically running, they hurried down the drive into William's house. After removing her coat and gloves, Barbara pulled the box open and removed her family album. William stood behind her as she turned to the page with the missing photo. William looked at the album and at the 3 pictures on the page. There were Barbara's mother with two little girls standing in front of her on the same stairs and railing that were in his picture. He reached for his photo and placed it into the adhesive corners that had been empty for more than 40 years. "How did you know?" Barbara couldn't hold back her tears at seeing that. Neither could William. She embraced him and he embraced her back, and they both quietly wept with great joy on each other's shoulders. It was later in the evening when Barbara went home. She wanted to call her sister and be first to tell her what had happened. She picked up the phone and dialed her number. It was earlier for her sister by a couple of hours. After the 4th ring, her sister Jean picked up the phone. "Hello? Hi, Jean, it's Barbara." "Well, hi, Barbara. Is everything all right?" "Yes, everything is just fine, but I have something very exciting to tell you." Jean shouted in the phone, "Are you getting married?" Barbara laughed and answered, "No, it's something even bigger than that." Barbara took her time telling her sister all that had transpired. She wanted her sister to realize that their mother had taken great steps to make sure they were brought back together, especially since she had gone. Jean was stunned and full of questions, not believing it to be true, but when Barbara told her about the picture, she was awed. "This is a miracle," Jean said. Barbara had not thought of it that way. She had just thought of it as a mother's way of making things right, but down deep in her heart, she knew it truly was a miracle. She insisted Jean make a trip out to meet her long-lost brother, and Jean agreed to come as soon as she could. After saying goodnight, Barbara put a kettle on for tea. Tonight it would be chamomile, to soothe and bring on sleep. She pulled her lovely chipped porcelain cup down from the cabinet and tempered it with hot water. She then poured out the water and placed a tea bag into the cup, plus a dollop of clover honey, and poured the boiling water over it. Placing it on a small saucer, she walked into her bedroom and sat down at her desk. She looked over at the dark picture frame and wondered at it all. Each message, each picture. Would she ever hear her mother's voice again? Or see another picture? Barbara drank her tea and readied herself for bed. She pulled her sheets back and slipped under the covers when the frame lit up. There was a picture of her mother wearing her robe and holding her teddy bear. Barbara has a child, holding the teddy bear Barbara had as a child. She asked, "Did you brush your teeth and floss?" She laughed and started to sing the lullaby she sang to Barbara as a child. Even at her advanced age, her lovely voice was soothing. Barbara listened to the lullaby and watched the photo start to fade and heard the song finish as she drifted off to sleep. The frame lit up again. She heard her mother say, "Happy birthday, Barbara. Remember, I love you and I always will be with you." And this is the picture of her mother from the frame. That is the end of the story. When I was writing this book and it occurred to me how the story was to end, because I really didn't know, I was so excited. It was about midnight and I ran upstairs and woke my husband up and said, "You're never going to guess what happened." And I was very excited that it had an ending and yet a beginning. I'm going to read to you a little bit the postscript here. Within 2 weeks, Barbara's sister Jean came to meet William. It was just what Barbara and Jean needed to bring them closer together, especially now after their mother's death. William was beside himself with his newfound family. He finally had a real sense of where he came from and more than 100 years of handwritten recipes to prove his culinary hypothesis of his cultural food cravings. Being both neighbors and cooks, there was seldom an evening when the two weren't together exploring one of the family recipes. The news of what happened spread fast in the small community. There was even an article printed in the local paper which sparked the interest of folks as far away as California. It wasn't long before Barbara and William wrote a cookbook together called Soulful Soups. And with William's help and connections, the book had become very well known and sold so successfully that Barbara was able to dedicate more of her time to the culinary arts. Barbara and William's cookbook collaboration have taken them all over the United States and even to Italy. They stayed with Katrin Marbella's Uncle Vinny in Florence and got an insider's tour of some of the most amazing and hard-to-find restaurants and family-owned stores. In the spring, they plan to head to the East Coast to stay with a friend of William's who owns a bed and breakfast. William has also promised Barbara that she'll get a chance to work with another friend who is an executive chef at a beautiful historic inn in West Virginia. Oh, I should mention that the bed and breakfast is rumored to be haunted, and William becomes quite smitten with a beautiful and talented opera singer who is lost in her own past. Thank you very much for staying with me all the way through. I hope that you're interested in hearing The Last Aria. That is the next book in this series. It can be purchased at Anderson's Corner or the Romney Co-op, the Hampshire Co-op in Romney, or you can purchase it from my website by going to theoperasinginchef.com. The word "the" as in theoperasinginchef.com. Click on books and you can order it there, and I'll send the companion recording free of charge. Thank you so much and enjoy. Have a nice evening.